So this is a question box. It's just, I tend to do these the last service of the year just to answer lingering questions before I disappear for a month. So what's your favorite hymn? Well, I have a lot, but I just told you 103 for all the saints. I mean, it just holds up those who, saints, it calls them saints, which UUs don't really get into, but just, we used to call, back like in the 50s when I was a kid, little kid, they used to call really strong members of congregation, well, so-and-so is a good churchman. Well, that's sexist, you can't. It's a good church woman, good church person. But Alice Blair Wesley, one of the UU saints, I guess you'd say, and a longtime minister and scholar, she had a term, super people, which this congregation has many. I'm not going to single anybody out, but you know who they are. And so for all the super people, what's your UU elevator speech? Well, I don't really have one because I'm a minister. I can go on and on. But the idea of the elevator speech is somebody says, "Oh, you're UU. What are they all about?" And you only have 20 seconds or. I mean, basically Unitarian. All is one. We don't deny the Trinity, but we treat it like poetry, not like dogma. And the universalism is that historically, Christian universalists believe that all are saved, that at the last day of judgment, all are brought back into the Godhead, and that everything in the gospel accounts that Jesus said or did that we see about him is totally incompatible with the idea of everlasting torment. I mean, just totally. So, but it's not just Christian Unitarians or Universalists. All the faiths have Universalist pieces and practitioners and speakers. Because if you think about it this way, if everything, now you got to think theologically for a second. If everything comes out of God, okay, so God in the beginning was chaos and desolation, the Spirit of the Lord, the Spirit of God over the face of the deep, but everything before, antecedent to all categories, all is one, and that, it's not a thing, that pattern generates everything, all multiplicity, all forms come out of that primal unity. So that theologians say, well, that's God, okay? But if everything comes out of that, then somehow, then it's natural that everything has to go back into it, after all categories, antecedent to all categories, and when we die, whatever, everything, it's just, there's no more, you don't think anymore. You're not stuck in the subject-predicate distinction. You're in the now. You recognize that. When you're dead, well, who knows? But we, traditionally, and I know in my heart, nobody's going to everlasting torment. There may well be, as many think, and I like to think, there may well be some, justice, or that people are accountable for their actions, and if you've treated people in a bad way, you have to deal with that. But I think that what you have to deal with is your own karma, your own feelings about how you've been, how you behave, and the people you were less than your better self to. You hold that, and it kind of you struggle with that as you get older. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who are getting ready to die, and there's some, and soldiers, who had to kill people and they don't feel good about it. All of that is what holds the spirit down. And the Universalists will say, yeah, but not to worry. I think so. So, is that my elevator speech? See, that had to be a 103-story building. And there's, what is your personality type? Well, I'm, ENFP, or INFP. I'm right on the line. I've taken this is the Myers-Briggs personality type inventory. And you're either extroverted or introverted, intuitive or sensory, I guess, feeling or thinking, perceptive or judging. Yeah. Which doesn't mean judgmental. It means, you make a choice. People that are J's just, well, geez, people that are P's, well, wait a minute, I'm gathering more information. So I'm like a lot of ministers, I'm an I or an ENFP, intuitive, feeling type with perception. Now, when you say feeling, it's not like you're stupid. It's just that that's kind of your proclivity, that you end up choosing out of how it feels as opposed to the rational thinking it through. I know how to think, and I'm very thankful to my parents and my teachers who helped me learn how to think. But when it comes to finally deciding, this feels right, So that's, and I and E, I'm enough of an introvert that I need, the way you can tell is if you're an introvert, you find solitude nourishes you. You need to have periods of quiet like that hymn was about, where you can just recharge. If you're an extrovert, a party is how you recharge, and everybody, talking, how's it going, da-da-da. And, I like both. I really do. I'm pretty much right on the line. But I think it's very hard to be either an introvert or an extrovert all the time. I think no matter where you are on that spectrum, you need a little of the other. What are the pros, cons of having another interim minister during next year? Well, I don't think there are any cons. I mean, it's cons, yeah. You save money if you don't have one. That's about it. But I think that ministers help in a lot of ways that aren't necessarily seen, and they can help kind of keep your task of getting ready for a new minister front and center. And you can learn just recognizing another style, somebody who's more, I'm not like Lucas. Lucas had a different preaching style. He had a different counseling kind of mojo. He related to people in a Lucas way, and it was a good way. I mean, he was well loved here, and rightly so. And I'm different. But the church didn't collapse. I didn't get busted or anything like that, and bring humiliation to the church. And that's going to be true for all the interim ministers that I know, all the ministers I know. I mean, well, there are people who screw up, but mostly I think they're a wonderful batch. And sometimes, I have to admit, I'll find some minister, I'll think that their gifts are rather elusive to me. But if I wait long enough, I'll be reminded how great they were. Perry Tronstein was this older woman minister when I was pretty young in this trade, and in Maine, this craft is a better word, I suppose. And I just thought she was a real lightweight, and I would roll my eyes. Anyway, and then we had these things that ministers do that we call odysseys when you go to a retreat, and one of the ministers will be honored in a way to write their odyssey. It's really kind of their spiritual autobiography, and they run the gamut. Anyway, so Perry Tronstein did one. And I was so personally humiliated at myself for having thought so little of her. It was such a powerful statement. It was so inspiring. And it just taught me, these people you're lucky to be in this guild. Everybody here has got a lot. So I hope you do get another interim, and I know there's some good ones out there, and I commend you if you do, and I love you if you don't, but I think you'll be happier. And the music committee can testify because they spent all the last half year doing all the work of a choir director and music director, and they're tired. Are you tired? Yeah. And so, you want to do that for the church. It's not so much the preaching, that's part of it. You can get hotshot people to come in, and you have some very good people yourself who can, among you, can preach. But it's the nurturing the institution. And that's hard to do. Professionals are pretty good at it, that's all. You got to give them credit. What are the reasons you are leaving that you haven't talked publicly about? I don't talk publicly about those things. Well, I didn't say anything about the 40% pay raise I'm going to get, and, that's hard to just ignore. It's a 500-member church. I think they have 2 services, which oddly I prefer. They have a beautiful campus, as you do, but it's more developed. And because it's 5 years long, I can buy a house, which, when you're going all the time, you're always renting, and here in California, it gets way out of balance, seems to me. So, anyway, and it'll be interesting in Seattle because I came here last fall, and my dear Aunt Fran was in Berkeley in a nursing home, and she, over the next 2.5 months, she died. And I got to spend almost every day with her, and that was important. But I lived in Berkeley in the 70s, or the Bay Area, and I have some friends here that go way back. Well, Carol didn't know anybody, my partner. So now we're going to Seattle, where we're both on even ground, and I think that will be that'll be good. That'll be a challenge, but it'll be fun. When was the last time you had a mustache? Now these questions, some of these questions, really. But I had a beard and mustache for 40 years, from when I was in, not college, but then I worked in the House of Representatives, and I didn't have it. But then when I came to Berkeley, hey, Berkeley, So it was at 74 to 14, But it was getting gray, It was getting, they talk about gray beards, And it made me look older. And I'm not that vain, but who wants to look older? Anyway, so I got rid of it. And I think now I'm used to myself this way. It's weird, but who knows? Is there any UU association plan to protest the separation or the separating of children and parents as a national effort? And I expect there is. I mean, a lot of churches, a lot of even conservative Christian churches too, have kind of put their foot down at this. I mean, they have little kids are in like orphanage situations that, family values, come on. So I expect that to happen, and I didn't have this question yesterday, or I would have looked up on the website and see what they're doing, but I would be very surprised if the UUs aren't involved in an ecumenical effort to influence the Attorney General to stop this. How do we get more teens and young adults in here? And Bob and I talk about this a lot. The kids are very, they're churning with the kinds of questions that churches address, but they don't like the churchy format, or they've been proselytized by friends or others with a shame-based or guilt-inducing encouragement. So they make a judgment early. If I'd have stayed this second year, and if you do get a new interim and they ask me what I think, I'd say your biggest thing you got to focus on is membership. That is, to being very specifically reaching out. And Elise told me, I think it was, that in yesteryear, when she was younger, they arrived in Livermore and they got a postcard in the mail that said about the church. Somebody did. You did? A postcard, Well, you can specify who that is. And there's a lot of outreach methods and social media, but to make a collective effort to be more reaching out. With respect to the teens, here's Paul's son. He probably came because it was Father's Day and he had to be, he's 14. When my daughter was 14, it's when she said, "Dad, do I always have to come to church?" Now, before that, she'd loved church. And now she's a member of church in Australia, a UU fellowship. But, young people are sorting through the values they've heard at home. And when we're teens, we recognize the ways in which our parents are not perfect. And our job is to detach from them or springboard away from them, but to maintain, you integrate. Like my mother's long ago dead, but she lives right here and talks to me all the time about how to behave and what I shouldn't be doing. And don't use that knife, use the butter knife, and all these things. But mostly about justice issues and about treating people and about giving my daughter and now grandchildren a fair shake. So, and our young people, our teens, they're doing all that, but they need to, sometimes you need, like that second hymn, you need to get away to kind of reflect that. Now, if we had a good youth group, we've had a pretty good, we've had that in the past. We have the kernel of it now because they like talking to each other. And that can amplify what they're struggling with. So I don't have a magic answer, but the hard answer is you got to all collectively make it a goal and then do the homework and figure out what to do. There are successful programs and outreach efforts that are out there, and you can apply them. And I know your children and youth advisor, Bob, is reading all that stuff all the time and doing everything he can to support him. Now, we've got the solar and the insulation. What's the next big project for UUCIL? Well, I just said, a membership drive. I mean, it's funny. Our church, especially in New England, it's unbelievable. You can always get money for the building. But can you get money for programming? That's a little harder. People go, well, I didn't know. Well, I see the result. I can see the building, And in those Yankee churches on the Village Green, it's a symbol. There's a great deal of pride involved. Well, there's pride here, too, and it's well taken care of. You have a lovely campus, but you really do. And this only makes it better. But to encourage more creative programming is harder to fund or get people to pony up for. And actually, you did at the annual meeting for the RE, and I really respect this church a lot, and that only increased my feelings in that regard. And now why is the UUA Association not growing in membership? Don't get me started. I don't know. Some of our churches are, and not all of them are. I think you've got to be innovative, and you got to be outreaching, and you got to be not too churchy in your format, and you got to be people. Here's what I believe. I think everybody has in their heart an archetype of a great church. Maybe you don't even know, a great mosque, a great temple, but a great group of people who choose to support each other in aspiring to their highest ideals, to their listening to their better angels and caring for one another and supporting one another when that doesn't happen or when in all kinds of exigencies of life. It's amazing what we do, but how do you get people to do that? And to, the other thing that churches sometimes happen is it becomes an arena for people to act out their issues. And a little bit is okay, because we all have issues and we support each other and kind of burning through that, okay? But if it becomes, like I say, an arena where you can kind of, it's manipulative in a way. People think it's about me, And it's one of our problems because we tell people, yes, here you're accepted. We want you to be yourself, inherent worth and dignity of everybody. Well, the thing about inherent worth and dignity, it's really about everybody else's inherent worth and dignity. Don't get hung up on hey, respect my inherent worth and dignity. We do, okay? But it helps to see how beautiful and wholesome and good everybody is, all kinds of other people. And then to kind of de-egoize what we're trying to do here and to be supportive of, the still small voice. The human personality is bigger than just our egos. But some people don't even know that. They're just totally only in their ego. They never let go of that. And that's really sad. And I think almost everybody here, I'm in my ego a lot. You got to be in your ego. It's like a thumb. It's very hard to operate without an ego. I'm responsible. I've got to pay taxes. I've got to pay my bills. I have familial obligations to people I love and have supported. You need an ego, but you can't let it rule all the time. Especially in a place like this, we learn how to also get in touch with deeper parts of identity. And when that happens, people recognize it right away, and they love it. I was back, I had a 3-year ministry on Martha's Vineyard, and I almost hated every minute of it. I tell people, well, the geography's unsurpassed, too bad the people don't measure up. After 1 year, I was ready to quit the ministry altogether, and serendipitously, I was in Minneapolis, and I went to Unitarian Church in St. Paul, and I walked in, and there was a long meditation. It was like much longer than I'd been used to. It was like maybe 3 or 4 minutes. I do 2. And I liked that right off. And then the sermon, everything about it. If I'd have been a layperson, I would have joined that church that day because it absolutely signified for me. Well, I think everybody has that archetype. And when you see it, know it. And people here have told me, I felt it when I came here. And I was, well, everybody's archetype's a little different. How do you, but try to touch that. I mean, that's what I do. I try to do that. I try to engender little epiphanies in people's hearts and minds. I try to help church. I try to keep things kind of. I said to the search committee in Bellevue, they've been struggling the last 4 or 5 years. And I read all this material and I said, I think what you really need is to lighten up a little bit. And they loved that because that's what they did like. They wanted, because church is too important to be taken without humor and without a little whimsy. And so all those things can help. And some of our churches are just too stiff and too Puritan. We got this Puritan tradition. We come out of the Puritans, and we've transcended it, but some of our church can still be very ardent, and they can do a lot of good social justice work, but it's shame-based at its core. It's like if you were a better Unitarian, you would be doing this now. And I don't think you engage people's hearts and their full being that way. I think you have to, if you knew me when I was 17, you'd never think I'd be a minister. I never would have thought I would. I was an arrogant little punk, and I was a smart ass, forgive me for saying that, but I was. My mother says, smart aleck. But I got into religion. I was amazed at the transcendentalism that bubbled up as I began studying religion and caring about it and adopting religious practices. And I've seen our churches grow, but some of them don't. They're just a little too stuck. And ministers can talk about ego. You can talk about helping people transcend, but ministers, you need to have a kind of a strong ego, not a big ego, but you need a strong one to get up here week after week and assume people care what you say, and put energy into trying your best. But if it becomes a big ego, it puts people off, and I think rightly so. It puts me off. So to have that kind of connection and to understand, like Lucas came to this church and he kind of fit. It took him maybe a year or so, it always does, to kind of find your sea legs. But when they fit, it's good and everything's congruent. Communities of congruence, Parker Palmer calls them, and they're great. And when that happens, church will bump along for years working at this stuff, and then suddenly things click. Right people are there, and there'll be an 18-month, 24-month growth spurt that'll blow everybody's mind. And I've seen it happen, and it's happened to me. But you got to do your homework for a long time. And part of what the minister does is help get the right people in the right jobs. And so I think you have a bright future, actually. And I think the UUA could too. But it's, institutions, they're exasperating. But anyway, it's this institution I've given my life to, and I'm proud of it. So. And I want all you to do the same. And then it will grow. If you can activate that passion and hope and goodwill, people recognize it immediately, and the place will grow. All right, it's time to